Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been looking forward to watching the new Halloween movie for months. After a brutal 12-hour shift at the investment firm where I work, I decided to catch the opening night showing despite still being in my work suit. The thought of driving home to change and then heading back to the theater seemed like too much effort, so I figured I'd just go straight there. I settled into my luxury recliner with my overpriced popcorn and soda, ready to enjoy the movie. The theater had these nice dividing walls between rows, so you couldn't really see the people below you unless you stood up. During the previews, I noticed a woman walking in with 3 kids, a middle schooler, a toddler who looked maybe 3 or 4 years old, and an actual baby that couldn't have been older than a year. They sat in the row right in front of me. This wasn't some kid-friendly horror movie. This was Halloween, one of the most brutal slasher franchises out there. The movie started, and it didn't take long for the baby to start crying. Not just quiet whimpering, but full-on piercing screams that drowned out the dialogue. The mother did absolutely nothing to quiet the child down. After about 20 minutes of this, I got up and found 2 employees outside the theater. I explained to them that there was a woman with a baby and toddler in the theater, and that the baby's crying was disrupting the movie. I asked if they could do something about it. The employees assured me they would get their manager to handle the situation. I went back to my seat, but 15 to 20 minutes passed with no sign of any staff. Meanwhile, the baby continued wailing intermittently. I knew the really violent scenes were coming up, and I wasn't about to let this baby's inevitable screaming ruin the climax of the movie. I went back out to find the employees again. I told them that 20 minutes had passed and nothing had been done while the baby was still crying. The manager assured me she would go speak with the mother right away. I stood by the entrance as the manager and an employee approached the mother. The manager explained apologetically that the woman would need to leave, citing the complaints about the disruption and explaining their policy about not allowing children under 6 in R-rated movies after 6 p.m. The woman protested indignantly, pointing out that she had paid for the tickets. The manager offered her a full refund but insisted she would still need to leave. The woman argued that they couldn't make her leave because her older child wanted to watch the movie. The manager maintained that their policy was clear and warned that if she didn't leave voluntarily, they would have to escort her out. The woman finally gave in, declaring angrily that the place was terrible and she would never return. She gathered her kids and stormed out, the toddler trailing behind with a sippy cup while she carried the crying baby. The rest of us finally got to enjoy the movie in peace. After it ended, I found the manager to thank her. She revealed that the woman should have never been allowed in to begin with, explaining their policy about children under 6 not being permitted in R-rated movies after 6 p.m. She mentioned that the employee who sold the tickets was new and didn't know the policy. I expressed my relief that it got resolved before the really scary parts started. The manager told me that they had given the woman a refund since it was partly their mistake, but added that she had been placed on their watch list and wouldn't be allowed to purchase tickets if she tried this again. When I left the theater, I saw the woman at the customer service desk demanding additional compensation for what she called her ruined evening. The irony of her complaining about her evening being ruined when she had disrupted everyone else's night wasn't lost on me. I later heard from one of the employees that she'd been permanently banned from the theater chain after she threw her drink at the customer service representative. All I wanted was to watch a horror movie after a long day at work. Instead, I got a front row seat to a different kind of horror show, entitled Parenting at its Finest. I've always found comfort in rescuing dogs. After losing my parents in a car accident 2 years ago and moving in with my aunt, dogs became my emotional anchor. They understand pain in a way most humans don't. I currently have 2 rescue dogs, both with heartbreaking backgrounds. The older one was found chained outside an abandoned house, severely malnourished. The younger one was rescued from a puppy mill. Despite their rough starts, they've grown into the sweetest companions anyone could ask for. Living with my aunt has been great. She works from home and supports my love for animals, even helping me with the adoption process. We live in a quiet area with plenty of walking trails, perfect for daily dog walks. Even during the pandemic, I made sure to maintain their exercise routine. It was good for all of us, really. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to take my older dog for a walk while the younger one was napping. The weather was perfect, not too hot, with a gentle breeze. We took our usual route through the neighborhood, passing by the local shops. That's when I noticed a new donut shop had opened up. The display windows showcased rows of beautifully decorated donuts that made my mouth water instantly. There was a "No Dogs Allowed" sign on the door, but the owners had thoughtfully set up a small area outside with a water bowl and a sturdy post for leashing dogs. I secured my dog's leash to the post, made sure she had access to the water, and went inside to check out their selection. The shop was relatively busy with 3 customers ahead of me, so I pulled out my phone to browse through social media while waiting. That's when I heard it, a horrific yelp that made my blood run cold. I rushed outside to find a middle-aged woman repeatedly hitting my dog with an umbrella. My dog was cowering, trying to avoid the blows while being restricted by the leash. I immediately shouted at her to stop hitting my dog. I jumped between them, taking a few hits to my leg in the process. The woman, red-faced and wild-eyed, kept trying to reach around me to hit my dog. She started yelling about how my dog had scratched her car, accusing me of letting it run around without a leash. I tried explaining that my dog had been leashed here the entire time and pointed out that her car wasn't even on this side of the street. She continued screaming, claiming she had to chain up my vicious animal herself after it attacked her car. She threatened to call the police and demanded I pay for the damages with my insurance. I told her that I was only 15 and didn't have any insurance, reminding her that I had leashed my dog myself and she hadn't chained anything. By this point, other customers from the shop had come outside to see what was happening. I was shaking with anger and fear, trying to protect my whimpering dog while fumbling with my phone to call the police. The police arrived within minutes. Karen immediately switched her demeanor, putting on a show of being the victim. She eagerly told the officers that my dangerous dog had attacked her and she was just protecting herself and her property. The police separated us to take our statements. I could hear Karen spinning her tale about my vicious dog running loose and attacking both her car and her person, and how she heroically restrained the animal. When it was my turn, I explained what actually happened. The officers then asked to review the donut shop's security footage. While they were doing that, I checked my dog for injuries. She was trembling and had a few tender spots where the umbrella had struck her, but thankfully nothing seemed broken. What happened next was incredibly satisfying. After reviewing the footage, the officers approached Karen with handcuffs. She immediately started screaming and resisting, forcing them to physically place her in the patrol car. When they took her away, she kept screaming threats about harassment and lawsuits, insisting my dog was dangerous. Her threats echoed as they drove away. The shop owner came out and offered me some free donuts, expressing how sorry they were about what happened. They even gave my dog a plain donut as a treat. A few days later, I learned through my aunt's friend who works at the courthouse that Karen had been arrested not just for attacking us, but also for multiple counts of insurance fraud. Apparently, she had a history of claiming random damage to her car and trying to extort money from innocent people. She was also facing attempted murder charges for trying to push her co-worker out of a window at her previous workplace. She ended up getting sentenced to 5 years in prison. I considered pressing additional charges for animal abuse, but honestly, knowing she's behind bars and can't hurt anyone else for a while is enough for me. My dog has slowly started to trust going on walks again, though she's still wary of strangers with umbrellas. The donut shop has become our regular stop now, and the owners always make sure to have a fresh bowl of water and a plain donut ready for their favorite furry customer. People have lost that last bit of sanity during these troubling times. Okay, so I smoke cigars. Mostly cheap factory rejects, but an occasional good one too. I do not smoke in my house or around other people, as I know a very select group of people enjoy that particular aroma. Another point to note here, I drive my youngest to and from school, which is less than a mile away, seeing as the weather in my neck of the woods is bipolar at best. So setting, yesterday afternoon I parked way outside the school zone in a line to pick up kids, probably a block away, in a residential neighborhood. I drive a big truck with a loud exhaust system. I'm in the line of vehicles, engine off, listening to a good book on Audible, smoking the last bit of a good cigar. For those who don't know, a cigar can be set down and refreshed if need be. Also, I never smoke on school grounds, and always have it out before my kid gets in the truck. It's my truck and no one else drives it, so I don't mind the smell of tobacco, and I have a bottle of Febreze that I use every couple of days. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, I see a woman get out of her car and begin to approach me. I watched her walk up past the two vehicles behind me and head my way. She's got the typical Karen looks, hair, clothes, way too much makeup and the like. She comes up right on my window and just stands there looking at me. When I rolled down my window, she demanded to know what I thought I was doing. When I expressed confusion, she accused me of smoking MJ on school grounds, saying I should be ashamed. I asked what she was talking about and she insisted she could see and smell it. I explained it was clearly a cigar, but she refused to believe me and threatened to call the police. I dismissed her as a weirdo. After my dismissive response seemed to short-circuit her brain, she tried to open my door, which was locked. Then she reached in my window and tried to grab the cigar out of my mouth. Now, life has taught us all from a very young age that fire is hot and things that burn from fire are also hot. But physics never seems to be on the forefront of these jerks. So she immediately burned her hand on the cigar and jumped back screaming that I did that on purpose. I started laughing because it was funny. She then tried the door again, and I obliged by opening it as hard as I could, which knocked her back onto her back, which made me laugh even more. She threatened to report me for assault and get both me and my kid kicked out. I told her to return to her car before she had a heart attack. She walked back to her car all the while yelling obscenities. I made sure to keep an eye on her in my rear view until we got closer to the school. Now, the school principal is always outside directing traffic between the parents and school buses. He and I know each other because being in a northern state, but being fans of the U of Miami is not something you see a lot up here, so we've talked about football and other stuff about the school, so he knows me a little, and my truck is unique in size, color, and exhaust. As I'm waiting to pull up to the place where you pick up your kid, I see Karen park, get out, and head directly towards the principal. She made sure to walk by me and give me dirty looks, like I guess that was supposed to intimidate me or something. Spoiler alert, it did not. She gave the principal an earful, couldn't quite hear what she said, but made sure to be as dramatic as possible, probably telling him I'm a drug addict and a monster and all that. Principal is doing his best to direct traffic and put up with her nonsense, and I assume said something to placate her because she walked away all smug and again made sure to walk by me so I could see her big grin. I smiled back and waved at her sassily. I pulled up and my kid got in, and as I figured he would, the principal came over to me. He asked if I had really put out a MJ cigarette on her hand and slammed my door into her head. I explained the absurdity of her claims, clarifying that she had burned herself trying to grab my cigar and that while I did open my door when she tried to force her way in, I hadn't hit her head, noting that if I had, she would have been knocked out. The principal sighed deeply, indicating he had suspected as much, and simply asked me not to retaliate as he didn't need another headache. I assured him I was just there for pickup and expressed our shared enthusiasm for the Miami team. My kid put up the U symbol as we drove away, and that's it. I'll be picking up the kid later today again, so hopefully there's no repeat of that nonsense. Karen will be so thrilled to know that I didn't get the outcome she thought I would after telling the principal. At least she got what she deserves and had her hands burned and her butt falling to the floor. I mean, that's what happens when you don't mind your business. I never planned to move to Sacramento. I grew up in Ohio, I had always imagined taking over my father's hardware store, but life had other plans. When the store went under due to the new supermarket opening on the outskirts of town, I knew I needed a fresh start. My cousin out in California mentioned the booming job market there, so I packed up what little I had and headed west. The transition wasn't easy. Sacramento was different from what I was used to, bigger, faster, more expensive. I couldn't afford a place on my own with my entry-level job at the manufacturing plant, so I ended up sharing a house with 5 other guys. 3 bedrooms, 2 people per room. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. My roommates were a diverse bunch. There was a municipal bus mechanic who worked the graveyard shift, 2 factory workers, a clerk at the local grocery store, and 2 construction workers. We didn't socialize much, but we respected each other's space and kept the house running smoothly. Everything was fine until autumn came around. In Sacramento, residents would rake their leaves into neat piles by the street, and the city would send vacuum trucks to collect them on scheduled days. It was an efficient system until some local teenagers decided to make it their personal entertainment. The first time it happened, we thought it was a one-off incident. We heard a car engine revving late at night, followed by the sound of leaves scattering everywhere. In the morning, our carefully gathered pile was spread across half the street. I asked out loud who would do something like this. My roommate from the grocery store just shrugged as we started raking again, suggesting it was probably just some kids having fun and that they'd get bored eventually. But they didn't get bored. Every few nights, we'd hear the same thing. An engine revving, laughter, and our leaves getting scattered everywhere. If we didn't clean it up before the city came, they wouldn't collect the leaves and we'd be stuck with them until the next scheduled pickup. After 3 weeks of this, our mechanic roommate had enough. He'd come home from his night shift multiple times to find the mess, and having to clean it up before getting any sleep was wearing him thin. One evening, as he was leaving for his shift, I noticed him unloading something from his truck. I asked if he needed any help, but he declined, saying mysteriously that he was just doing a little pest control. I didn't think much of it at the time, but around 2 a.m., we were all jolted awake by an enormous crash outside. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through the neighborhood, followed by shouting and car doors slamming. We all rushed outside to find a car with its front end completely smashed. 3 teenagers were standing around it, looking dazed. Our leaf pile was scattered again, but this time it revealed what they'd hit. A solid engine block that our mechanic roommate had hidden beneath the leaves. The police arrived quickly, and that's when things got interesting. One of the officers recognized the driver and asked if he wasn't Officer Thompson's boy. The teenager just looked at the ground, refusing to make eye contact. They called his father, and I'll never forget that conversation I overheard. The officer on scene reported that his son was involved in an incident. The father's first question was whether his son was hurt. When told there was just some minor bruising, the father instructed them to let his son walk home, specifically ordering them not to give him or his friends a ride. He added that they would discuss this when his son got home. The teenagers' faces fell as they realized they'd have to walk home in the cold night air. When they trudged away, one of them turned back and demanded to know what kind of person puts an engine block in a leaf pile. I responded by asking what kind of person destroys other people's work for fun. When our mechanic roommate returned from his shift that morning, he walked in with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. He just commented cryptically that you never know what you're going to catch when you go fishing. We never had trouble with leaf pile drivers again. Word got around fast about the engine block incident, especially since the driver was a cop's son. When the police asked about the engine block, our mechanic roommate simply said he was planning to work on it that weekend and had covered it to protect it from the rain. Since there was no law against storing auto parts on your own property, they couldn't do anything about it. The police officer's son and his friends became the laughingstock of their school. Apparently, destroying people's leaf piles had been their signature prank for weeks, and now everyone knew how it had backfired on them. The repair bill for their car came out of their own pockets too. Their parents refused to help pay for damages caused while vandalizing property. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.